자, 후쿠시마 오염수, 일본의 해명이 참 들을수록 이게 미덥지가 않은데요. 이 문제를 수년간 추적해서 알려주고 있는 단체가 있죠. 그린피스입니다. 그린피스의 동아시아 수석 원자력 전문가 맡고 있는 션 버니 만나보겠습니다. 자, 나와주셔서 고맙습니다. 간단히 좀 소개를 해주시죠.
Yes. My name is Sean Burney. I'm a senior nuclear specialist with Greenpeace East Asia, working on nuclear issues, including in Japan on Fukushima.
일본은 이걸 처리수라고 하고 또 다른 시각에선 오염수라고 하는데 어떤 점에서 문제가 있기에 이 방사능 오염수다 이렇게 불러서 걱정을 하는지 설명해 주시겠습니까?
So this has been going on for many years. Greenpeace, together with other members of civil society and scientists, have been trying to understand what Japan is proposing. So we've been involved in many discussions in Tokyo with Japanese government officials, with scientists. And what's very clear, and we've known this for many years, is that the decision, the plans to discharge radioactive wastewater have no credible scientific basis. The Japanese government has not demonstrated that it is safe to do so. There are many, many things that the Japanese government is not explaining, maybe because they don't understand themselves. So there's huge scientific uncertainties about this plan, and it will not just be for 1 year or even 1 decade, but for many decades, perhaps beyond into the next century and beyond. So this is a huge radioactive experiment on the environment of the Pacific and the peoples of the Asia-Pacific region who depend and live along those coasts. So yeah, there's many scientific reasons why this should not happen.
과학이 정치에 오염되면 참 이게 믿을 곳이 없어지는데요. 이게 원전 사고나 이후 과정이 그렇죠. 일본 당국이 솔직하고 정확하게 좀 밝히고 이해를 구해주면 좋겠는데 그린피스에게는 제대로 알려주던가요?
Well, clearly they haven't given enough information publicly to their own people in Japan and to the international community. What information we have obtained gives us deep reasons to be concerned and opposed to these discharges. So yeah, the information has been extremely limited still, and that's unacceptable and has consequences for basically understanding what the Japanese government is really trying to do here. And they just don't answer questions. We've had direct dialogue only in these last months with officials from the Ministry of Economy. And when you ask them specific questions, they do not have answers.
일본의 원전사고 대응과 수습 그리고 이번에 오염수 관련 문제에서 그린피스가 가장 문제가 크다고 보는 것은 어떤 점일까요?
Well, there are many problems, but I think the fundamental issue is that they have not really explained the problems at the Fukushima Daiichi site and the root cause of this contaminated water. The contaminated water is a symptom of the problem. And the problem is that 3 reactors suffered severe catastrophic failure in March 2011, and that 3 reactor cores, the nuclear fuel inside those reactors, melted down. And that nuclear fuel, that nuclear debris, is still at the site. Of course, enormous amounts of radioactivity were released, but the vast majority of the radioactive threat to the Pacific, to the Asia-Pacific region, remains at the site. And the Japanese government has no credible plan for removing that nuclear fuel. It's maybe as much as 1,000 tons of highly radioactive nuclear fuel. And every day, water comes into contact with that nuclear material, and you therefore continue to increase the amount of radioactive water. So this is a problem that will not be solved by starting the discharge, because the discharges will have to go on so long as that nuclear fuel is in contact with the environment. And at the moment, that's pretty much forever. There's no credible engineering plan that Tokyo Electric, Japanese government, have for solving this problem. And so the discharge is not a solution. Even if you accept that there's no risk, which there, of course, there are major risks, it will not solve the underlying problem at the Fukushima Daiichi site. Now, the Japanese government does not want to talk about that.
각국의 이해관계 때문인지 반응이 복잡한데 어떻게 보면은 직접 당사자인 미국이 의외로 조심스러운 혹은 너그러운 편이고 IAEA 국제원자력기구도 상당히 조심스럽습니다. 이유가 뭘까요?
The International Atomic Energy Agency, and there are good scientists at the IEA, including within the task force. The problem is the IEA had already decided many years ago that the best option for Japan was to discharge the water. And so the IEA is directly complicit in this decision. Back in 2015, the IEA was advocating that the water discharge was probably the best option. In addition, the IEA is compromised because its primary function in the world is to promote nuclear power. And the Fukushima Daiichi disaster was very negative for nuclear power, also the IEA. And now we are living in a time when we are being told that nuclear power is necessary for climate, to meet the climate emergency. And the Fukushima problem has to be seen to being solved. You have to create the impression that 12 years after the start of the disaster, that everything's being sorted, the waste problems are being sorted, water problems are being sorted. It's a deliberate attempt to create this false reality that there are no problems with nuclear power. And as we've seen with Fukushima nuclear disaster, we're only in year 12 years after the start of the disaster. We're still in a very early phase of dealing with the consequences. But the discharge is part of that attempt to pretend that there's no problem with nuclear energy.
한일 관계 특수성 때문에 이 정직한 과학에 근거한 엄중한 대응이 참 절실하지만 우리 정부에 대해서 이게 답답하지 않느냐라는 지적이 있습니다. 그린피스에서는 지금 한국 정부의 대응을 어떻게 보시는지요?
Well, I think in a way it's embarrassing for the Korean government because actually the science, the critical science work has been done not by the Korean government, but by the islands of the Pacific Ocean, small independent nations that are absolutely vulnerable to any pollution. They've taken the initiative a few years ago to establish an independent scientific panel. That panel of experts from North America, from the Pacific region, they've presented their evidence. They've had direct dialogue with Tokyo Electric, with Japanese government, with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they've reported back to those governments in the Pacific Island Forum to say we are deeply concerned. These discharges should not go ahead. The Korean government has not done that. So it's in that sense, it's failed the people of Korea. We still have time. The Japanese government discharge plans are perhaps this spring or perhaps in the summer, but we still have time to challenge the Japanese government. Ultimately, maybe the only way to do this is through the courts, through the legal system in Japan itself, domestically, but also for governments, including the Korean government, through the International Court as it relates to the UN law of the sea. And it's very clear that the Japanese government is in non-compliance. It's in violation of its commitments under UNCLOS, the UN Convention for the Law of the Sea. Japan must comply with those laws that it is signed up to. It has not conducted an comprehensive environmental impact assessment. So there's strong legal basis for challenging the Japanese government. And that's not an easy decision to take, that diplomatic decision to challenge the Japanese government in international court. But that ultimately is what should happen.
마지막으로 전문가로서 이번 일본 오염수 방출 계획에 대해서 한국 사람들에게 꼭 당부하고 싶은 점이 있다면 말씀해 주시죠.
Yes, I mean, this is unfortunately not going to be solved even when they start the discharge. If they do start the discharge this year, this is going to go on for many, many decades, well beyond my lifetime and well into next century. So understanding the consequences, continuing to demand transparency, disclosure of information, following very clearly and in detail the situation at the Fukushima Daiichi plant as they continue to try and decommission the plant, that will be absolutely important. So firstly, making a demand of your elected politicians that they take this issue seriously and that they challenge the Japanese government. That's absolutely essential.
네, 함께해 주셔서 감사합니다.
Thank you so much.